I start my sermon in an unusual way. I offer you a bit of the Bible. The passage is Luke 16:19 to 23. In it we find Jesus sharing the story. There once was a rich man who used to dress in purple and the finest linen, and feasted sumptuously every day. At his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, who was covered with sores. He would have been glad to satisfy his hunger from the rich man's table. Dogs used to come and lick Lazarus's sores. One day the poor man died, and the angels carried him away to be with Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. In Hades, where he was in torment, he looked up, and far away was Abraham with Lazarus close beside him. In Hades, where he was in torment, he looked up, and there, far away, was Abraham with Lazarus close beside him. This was one of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's favorite passages from the Bible. He included it in one of the last speeches he gave before he was assassinated. He was in Memphis, Tennessee, supporting striking garbage workers. Two black men, Ernest Cole and Robert Walker, had been crushed to death by faulty compacting equipment that the city had refused to replace. The city would not give their families life insurance. The city would not pay their families workmen's compensation. Edgar Cole and Robert Walker, they died because the city of Memphis would not spend money on better equipment. Edgar Cole and Robert Walker, their families were left with nothing. Edgar Cole and Robert Walker, their fellow workers, went on strike to win better working conditions after they died. Edgar Cole and Robert Walker, I include their names in our service because the civil rights movement was a movement. It was not just Martin King. It was not just Rosa Parks. It was not just Martin King and Rosa Parks and John Lewis and Barbara Jordan. It was thousands of ordinary working class people protesting, marching, sitting in, singing, speaking up, and staring down old Jim Crow to improve their material conditions. It was the Montgomery bus boycott, the Freedom Riders, the March on Washington, the Selma to Montgomery marches. It was Freedom Summer. It was hundreds of black garbage workers in Memphis going on strike to improve their lives and the lives of their families. When the white mayor of the city refused to negotiate, the workers invited Martin King to Memphis to come lead their struggle. He told them about Lazarus and the rich man. He cast them, the workers, as Lazarus, the children of God in need of economic security. He cast the white power structure as the rich man. He said, America is going to hell if she does not use her vast resources of wealth to end poverty. America is going to hell, King warned at the end of his life. America is going to hell if the country does not do something about economic inequality, about poverty wages, about the price of groceries, about the price of housing he told us before he died. America is going to hell. And it appears that the country is nearing its destination. The country is about to arrive at its destination. Now, it's customary on the Sunday before Martin Luther King Jr. Day to celebrate how far the nation has come since old Jim Crow had his wings clipped. It's typical to lift up King's dream and the magnificent speech he gave on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. I still have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed, he said. I have a dream that one day the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave masters will sit together at the table of brotherhood, he shared. I have a dream. America is going to hell. We are between a dream and a waking nightmare. Tomorrow, someone who pals around with white supremacists, who encourages insurrection, who has callous disregard for human life, who maligns women, who sees fit to nominate sexual predators to the nation's highest offices, and who is devoted to government of the rich, by the rich, and for the rich, will reoccupy the White House. Tuesday, he is promising the deportations begin. Tuesday, families will be sundered and lives will be shattered. Tuesday. I have a dream. The president-elect's last term in office was a traumatizing experience. This Sunday, we celebrate the great dreamer. And I want to talk with you about trauma and the dream. The dream has been long deferred. The only way to overcome the trauma is to realize it. Trauma, you might recall, is the way our bodies respond to being overwhelmed, to suffering violence, and to experiencing abuse. It's not the abuse or the violence itself. It's the way we react afterwards. For many of us, the words abuse and trauma bring painful memories. Naming the reality of what we are collectively facing is not easy. It might help us to ground ourselves, if we ground ourselves in the present moment, take a deep breath and take sanctuary, safety, in the members of this religious community. Describing what is happening is not pleasant, but it is necessary if we are going to move through the next years. So breathe in again with me. Breathe out and find your grounding as we continue with our sermon. Abuse is not always physical. It can be psychological. Often it is trying to narrate how someone experiences reality, the stories we tell each other about what is true and what is real. The well-known phenomenon of gaslighting is a favorite tactic of abusers. That's what has happened with the narrative around January 6, 2021 is an unfortunate illustration of how gaslighting works. On January 6th, there was an attempt to overthrow the elected government of the United States and install someone who had lost a presidential election into the nation's highest office. We all saw it on television or on our small screens that day. An angry mob, many of them white supremacists, many of them carrying Confederate flags, many of them wearing neo-Nazi symbols, invaded the Capitol with the intention of stopping the peaceful transfer of power. They were instigated by the man who will be president tomorrow. Since then, he's repeated over and over again the untruth that the event was a day of love. He's denied that violence took place. He sought to replace the truth with what happened with a false narrative that benefits him. This is gaslighting, the repetition of a lie so often that the truth becomes obscured, lost, and people begin to doubt their own experiences. It is a form of abuse. And it is far from the only instance of abuse committed by the man who will be president. In a civil trial, a jury found that he had sexually abused a woman in a department store. More than 25 other women have come forward and alleged that he has also assaulted them. There is an audio tape of him bragging about all of this. In the face of this abuser-in-chief, we are having, many of us, traumatic responses. And those responses can be broken into 4 types. We can fight, we can fly, we can fawn, or we can freeze. Fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. Name the ranges of responses that people typically have to trauma. If Martin King's dream is ever going to be realized, then we will need to find the resources to fight. The dream itself contains the power to help us combat the abuser-in-chief and wake up from the nightmare to stop the country from going to hell. We will return to the power of Martin King's dream shortly. Before we do, it is important to observe how people are freezing, fawning, or flying at his ascendance. Freezing, this is one of the most common responses. Many of us simply do not know what to do. Not knowing what to do, we do nothing. 8 years ago, when the man from Mar-a-Lago was sworn into office, there were mass protests. Millions demonstrated, millions pledged to resist. This time, not so much. For many, the situation feels hopeless. Billionaires appear poised to loot the country and undermine our underdeveloped infrastructure. White supremacists are gleeful. Rights of all kinds are under assault. No easy path forward to protect them appears. Not knowing what to do, the impulse is to do nothing. I've had this reaction myself. The constant barrage of gaslighting, of misinformation, of manipulation takes its toll. Part of my response of this abuse has been to tune out what is happening, to freeze and pretend that life is just going on. And I know that I'm not alone in that response. Across the board, viewership and readership of non-right-wing media outlets is down. Many people are frozen. The problem with freezing is that it doesn't change anything. The old adage, misattributed to the philosopher Edmund Burke, is true. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. If we do nothing, then nothing changes. Flight. We often respond to trauma by trying to escape. People talk of leaving the country, moving to Europe or Mexico, or any place where women are respected, transgender people are not targeted, where it will not feel like life is a constant struggle against the abuser-in-chief. Some people in our community have made this decision. They've left Texas for states that protect women's reproductive health. They've left the country for places that are friendlier to transgender children. They've departed the United States to live lives where they can feel a little bit more free. I'm sympathetic. I found myself wanting to retreat somewhere, anywhere where I can avoid what is to come. In my fantasies, I find myself living the life of a mystic, pursuing inner freedom while the world around me burns. I find myself returning over and over to the words of Chinese recluse poets who during times of strife millennia ago forsook the world. Po Chuai. No esteem for the stately caps and carriages of consequence. In love with woods and streams, I go out and doze, perhaps drunk beside the pond. I've stopped trying to save the world, just wander herb paths, keep my little fishing boat swept out. Such inner efforts of flight are rarely fully successful. As for leaving the state or the country, sometimes it can work. The disturbing truth, though, is that the ascent of white supremacist or authoritarian movements right now is a global phenomenon. It's not something that can easily be escaped. Argentina, Israel, Hungary, Italy, the number of countries under the sway of right-wing governments seems to be increasing. To the politically informed, the option of flight reminds me of an old Hungarian Jewish joke. Comes by the way of my friend, the scholar Mark Lusteau. In it, two old Jewish men sit in their village in one of the offices of one of their homes. One of them says to the other, "Things are getting tough for our community." The other says, "Well, it's time to leave again." His friend looks at a globe and says, "Okay, there's a globe over there. Let's figure out where to go," and spins the globe around, puts his finger on a country, and says, "How about here?" "Nah," his friend says, "things there are even worse than they are here." His friend spins the globe again and says, "What about here?" "No, they're pretty bad there too." Spins the globe a third time. "Here?" "Nope." "Next globe, please." Next globe, please. So much of what the abuser-in-chief will make worse, resurgent white supremacy, an exacerbation of the climate crisis, growing economic inequality, destruction of public infrastructure, will be found almost everywhere in the next years. Just as significantly, flight might make sense for some of us. If you have to leave Texas or the United States, there's no shame in that. But it is not an option for all of us. Fine. This seems to be the response of much of the political and economic elite. They are accepting the outcome of the election. They are deferring to normalizing the former and future president. Human weather vane Mark Zuckerberg is changing. Human weather vane Mark Zuckerberg is changing his social media platforms' policies to once again accommodate the incoming administration. Senator John Fetterman visited that man from Mar-a-Lago in Mar-a-Lago. Even former President Barack Obama has been seen joking with him. Many congressional Democrats recently supported an anti-immigrant bill without winning any meaningful concessions. It limits the rights of migrants to due process. It authorizes detentions of any migrants who have been accused of theft or a variety of other crimes. That is, they have been accused of a crime, not convicted of one. Such fawning is often done in the hopes that the abuser will direct his gaze elsewhere. Members of the Republican Party have learned this lesson well. In the last decade, those who failed to fawn to the former president have found their political careers destroyed and themselves cast out into the political wilderness. For the rest of the party of Newt Gingrich and Strom Thurmond, fawning has been a response that has allowed them to survive and even thrive as the abuser-in-chief has taken control of their political movement. Freeze, flight, fawn, now we come to fight. This was Martin King's response to the abusive system of Jim Crow and white supremacist economic exploitation of the 1950s and 1960s. When Echo Cole and Robert Walker were crushed to death, he did not freeze. When he was asked to come to Memphis, he did not fly. When he was invited to lead the garbage workers, he did not fawn. He did not tell the white mayor what a wonderful man he was. Instead, he told the city council and the mayor, the white power structure, that they were like the rich man in the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. He warned them that if the country did not change its tact and find justice for all, then America is going to hell. America is going to hell. It is difficult to talk about Martin King's willingness to fight without acknowledging that it cost him his life. Sometimes fighting is not worth the mortal risks. There are reasons why people freeze, fly, or fawn instead. America is going to hell. Fighting does not mean going alone. It's about coming together to build collective power. Things are easier when you are part of a movement. Being part of a movement allows us to be stronger than we are when we are on our own. It's a bit like the Marge Piercy poem I read to you right after the election. 12 make a demonstration, 100 fill a hall, 1,000 have solidarity and your own newsletter, 10,000 power and your own paper, 100,000 your own media, 10 million your own country. The Memphis garbage strike ended with victory for the strikers. The city was forced to recognize their union and improve their working conditions and wages. The civil rights movement and the dream did not die with Martin King. The dream did not die. The poet Langston Hughes asked, "What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun?" King's dream has so often been reduced to the vision of people sitting together at the table of brotherhood. But that was only a fragment of it. An important dimension that gets left out of the narratives, gets forgotten on the civic holiday, is removed from the media accounts, is that he dreamed of an end to poverty and economic security for all. The widespread anger about the price of groceries, the price of housing, the recent round of inflation led to the election of the abuser-in-chief. The widespread perception that the Democratic Party does not care about working-class people put him back into power. In the next months, we will be reminded that he truly believes in plutocracy, government by the rich, while he practices kleptocracy, government by thieves, and embraces kakiostrophe, government by the worst. The only way to wake up from this nightmare is to embrace King's dream of economic security and build a spiritual movement to make his vision a reality. That's how that man from Mar-a-Lago can be deprived of much of his appeal. That is how we fight. That is how we honor the dream of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. So here comes my challenge for us as a religious community. What can we do together to build such a spiritual movement? I believe that First Unitarian Universalist can do great things. Our voting justice ministry was nothing short of remarkable. We organized over 250 volunteers. We registered almost 1,000 new voters. We contacted over 30,000 voters. We devoted 2,500 or more volunteer hours amongst the members of our congregation. For our efforts, the Unitarian Universalist Association has recognized First Unitarian Universalist as a good trouble congregation. A good trouble congregation. We have the potential to do more. In the coming years, rather than freezing, instead of flying, in the place of fawning, what would it mean if we came together to do something concrete to help people become more economically secure? Maybe we could establish a new set of community gardens. Maybe we could start a democratically managed housing complex. Maybe we could support a union organizing drive. Maybe we could start a Fury healthcare clinic. Maybe we could establish a workers' cooperative or push the city to start a chain of municipally managed grocery stores. That's what the city of Chicago is trying to do right now. This Sunday, as we sit at the precipice of disaster, as even President Biden must acknowledge that the country is being transformed into an oligarchy, there is still much we can do to bring Martin King's dream of economic security into being. Today, as so many of us are having traumatic responses, I invite you to dream about what we might do together as a religious community in the coming months and years. I hope that this service will be an invitation for you to imagine our collective potential. I aspire to work with you to help make that potential a reality. King knew that it was possible to make such a dream a reality. He closed some of his speeches thus: I know you are asking today, how long will it take? I come to you to say, however difficult the moment, however frustrating the hour, it will not be long, because truth pressed to the earth will rise again. How long? Not long, because no lie can live forever. How long? Not long, because you will reap what you sow. How long? Not long, because mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. My eyes have seen the glory. Let us this Sunday and all the days of our lives commit to be tellers of truth, workers for justice, and keepers of this dream. Let us rise and meet the coming day by turning fear into courage and despair into possibility, so that the best that we might imagine can become reality. Mine eyes have seen the glory. Let us commit ourselves to bringing that glory into being. And so let the congregation say, Amen.